I think today the FBI is a little different than when I was there. In the 1970s and the early 1980s, there was a huge fight on against organized crime. I was right in the middle of it as a street agent arresting Carlo Gambino, as a supervisor working against Alphonse Persico and Joe Colombo, and then as a young supervisor at FBI headquarters and eventually running the whole operation. I'm Sean McQueeny. I was an FBI agent for 23 years, from 1965 to 1988. I was sent to Providence, Rhode Island. Providence, Rhode Island was a big mafia center. The head of the mafia was Raymond Patriarca, and he was in charge of all of New England. So there was a lot of action going on in Providence, and I was one of the ones that were selected to work the organized crime. They wouldn't hesitate to kill me. That's the way we looked at it as FBI agents. You know, they were fun. They're funny people, and talk to them about sports. You talk to them about anything. But if you got involved with them in any kind of larcenous way, they'd kill you in a minute. I met two agents, high veteran agents. One time told me a story, and it was the story of Red Kelly. Red Kelly was a member of the Irish mob in Boston. He was a very prominent armored truck hijacker, and he also hijacked trucks of commercial goods. And he said he took them to a Gambino family associate in New York. And from there, the Gambinos would distribute it to stores that were willing to buy stolen goods. He had one time said to his Gambino associate, "Hey, I'd like to meet Carlo Gambino and pay him a tribute, a cash tribute." The associate from the Gambino family came back and said, "Yeah, we're going to meet." And they met eventually at a Manhattan diner late at night. And Gambino came with his appropriate bodyguards, and Kelly came with his partner. And Kelly gave him an envelope of $20,000 with a tribute, thanking him for letting the Irish mob from Boston operate in New York. He also said that he had a hijacking of an armored truck out of JFK Airport, which was going to the Citibank in New York City in Manhattan. He thought it would contain at least $25 million in currency. And he wanted to know if Gambino could help in washing the money. And Gambino said he would do it for a fee, and he would wash it through the Las Vegas casinos. That was good information, because at the time we didn't know the Gambinos were involved in the Las Vegas casinos, number one. And number two, it set up what was Carlo Gambino being involved in a conspiracy to send money over national boundaries in the United States, which was a felony in the federal court system. The problem we had, according to my two associates from the Boston division, was that once they arrested Red Kelly and were interviewing him up in an army base in Cape Cod, they lost track of the partner. The partner fled, and they didn't know where he was. He said, one, you got to find him, Sean. And secondly, you got to prove the interstate transportation of stolen property. When I went to New York, I talked to my supervisor, brand new supervisor, the Gambino family, and I told him I wanted to open a case on Carlo Gambino. Now, I was a relatively young agent, so he wasn't sure, and he assigned a senior agent to work with me, a guy named Art Fuss, who's now deceased. We basically proved all the interstate travel of all the stolen goods. And we finally found the partner. He was in prison at Attica State Prison in New York. We went there and interviewed him. We had authority from the United States Attorney's Office in Manhattan to give him witness security program status. we told him we'd get him out of prison from Attica. He then verified step by step what happened between Red Kelly and Carlo Gambino. We provided that information. I did. I was the case agent. So I provided the information to the attorneys at the Southern District of New York. They issued a warrant. We arrested Gambino. He was with his wife and daughter in a car. We took him out of the car. He was fine. He didn't give us any trouble. We took him into Manhattan at 69th and 3rd, where the FBI office was, photographed and printed him, allowed him a phone call to his attorney, which he talked to for several minutes. And then we took him outside of the office to turn him over to the marshals at the courthouse at 29 Federal Street in downtown Manhattan. When we left the office, there was an explosion of cameras. And in those days, they had the bulbs, the big bulbs. It wasn't like today with the iPhones and all that. And these bulbs all went off at one time and was blinding. And they had TV cameras and so forth. Was he convicted? No, he was not convicted because he had a pretty serious heart ailment. This was 1970 when we did the arrest. 1975, he died of a heart attack. It was a good lesson for the office, and it was a good lesson for the mob because, you know, in the office, the internal office of the FBI, I was a relatively young agent, as I said, and most of the other agents were looking at it and saying, well, hey, if Sean can arrest someone with the status of Gambino, maybe I can do something. So it was that lesson that if you work hard, you can get a guy like Gambino. Secondly, and more importantly, it was a lesson to the mob. Hey, if the FBI can arrest Carlo Gambino, they certainly can arrest me. Then I was made supervisor of the Colombo squad. That was a very active squad and it had a lot of good agents on it. And it was a real honor to be made supervisor of that squad. From there, I participated in the arrest of the acting boss at the time was a guy named Alphonse Alley Boy Persico. He was made the acting boss after Joe Colombo got shot at Columbus Circle. He was the leader of a organization called the Italian American Civil Rights League. The theme of it is that the Mafia and the media and everyone else was targeting all Italian Americans, which was not true. Absolutely. We had as many Italian Americans working as FBI agents as they had in the Mafia. Gambino called him up on the carpet because Gambino was the boss of all bosses in New York. Knock it off. You know, you're bringing heat on us, the mob guys. And Colombo accused him of being a traitor to the Italian cause. He spat on the floor at his feet, which was a real insult. The one thing you don't want to do is disrespect a boss like Gambino. We believe, there's no proof of this, this is a theory, and a lot of people support it, including myself, that Gambino went to Joe Gallo, a guy named Crazy Joe Gallo. He was a capo, and the captain in the Colombo family hated Joe Colombo and gave him a hit contract on Joe Colombo. Gallo probably hired a black African-American that was posing as a photographer, went to the rally and shot Colombo in the head. Huge story at the time. Colombo remained in a coma for several years and eventually died. The individual that pulled the shot, posing as the photographer, Jerome Johnson, was shot and killed at the site by Mafia members. Police officers surrounding the place made no arrests. So that was unusual. Alphonse Persico took his place. We eventually, as the squad, came up with a case against Alphonse Persico, Alley Boy. We went up to Saugerties, New York to arrest him. I led the arrest team. We went up at about 5 or 6 in the morning, and we saw a woman in the kitchen smoking a cigarette. It was his wife. Knocked on the window, showed our credentials, and she opened the door and let us in and said her husband was getting dressed. The agents went back in the bedroom where he was getting dressed, and I was just chatting with her. And two little kids came out, and they were a little tiny boy and a girl, and kind of wrapped their arms around their mother, and they were, scared a little bit. So I walked back into the bedroom and I told the agents not to handcuff Alley Boy, Persico. They were getting ready to handcuff him. I said, don't handcuff him. His children and his wife are in the kitchen. Let him walk out. And then they warned Alley Boy not to do anything. 2 weeks later, there was a major theft of crown jewels that taken from a Catholic church in Brooklyn, St. Rosalia Church. And the crown jewels were established in 1945 during World War II, and it was contributions of rubies and diamonds and so forth from girlfriends, wives, sisters of individual soldiers that were fighting overseas in World War II. And they had a ceremony. It was a lot of publicity, New York Times. It was a big deal. So when it was stolen by these two individuals, they went up on a ladder and took it off. It was big news. And so the next morning, we got a phone call from an informant of the Colombo family and told us, hey, we got the jewels. And we're getting ready to break them apart and sell them individually. I called Alphonse Persico because I thought I established a bit of a relationship with him as we rode into Manhattan after he was arrested. And I asked him if he would meet me, and he finally agreed. And we met in a park in Brooklyn. It was one of those one square block parks, and it had a middle area pathway. I walked from one end, he walked from the other. We sat on a bench in the cold weather, and I asked him if he had any information about the jewels, if he would let me know. The following morning, I was at home making breakfast for my children. The phone rang. It was the FBI switchboard operator in Manhattan. She said she had a rough talking individual on the phone that insisted on talking to me. He came on and he says, Mr. McQueeny, the package you want is in downtown Manhattan, locker 312. And he hung up. And that was all that conversation. He obviously was kind of a mobster type by the voice and so forth. I called a couple agents. We got a hold of the Port Authority. We got access to the locker. I got there. We opened the locker, and there were the crown jewels. And it was brilliant. I mean, it lit up the darn office that we were in. And we took them down, and they placed them on black velvet, and all of the news media came in. And it was a big deal. And our assistant director delivered the jewels to Cardinal Terence Cook, who was the Archbishop of New York. I think it was a matter of respect. I respected Alphonse Persico when I allowed him to walk out of his kitchen without handcuffs. He was enough of a criminal to know that was taking a chance by me. He could have done something. He could have had a gun in the kitchen or something like that, and it would have been a horrible thing that we did. I probably wouldn't be here talking about it today. But I respected him, and when I asked him for a favor, he respected me by going back and telling his mob guys that he was the boss of, hey, we're going to return the jewels. Respect is extremely important, and that's why when Joe Colombo spat on the floor at the feet of Carlo Gambino, that might have marked, if that story is true, that might have marked the end of Joe Colombo. We were managing the whole program from FBI headquarters when I was in charge of it. We had the Donnie Brasco, which was a movie starring Johnny Depp. That was the movie of the infiltration of the Bonanno family by an FBI agent named Joe Pistone. He was out of the New York office. He was personal friends with myself and my deputy, Jules Bonavolanta. And it involved the longest undercover operation, criminal undercover operation in the history of the FBI. It was almost 6 years. We kind of broke it up when he was ordered to kill another mob guy, Bruno Indelicato. Of course, we're not going to let him kill anyone. And we didn't want him killed because if you're looking to kill a mob guy, he's looking to kill you. And so we pulled him out. So that was managed from FBI headquarters by Jules Bonavolanta. That was part of his duties as my deputy, was to manage that case. And I remember going up and discussing it with the hierarchy at FBI headquarters. And one of the things that I kept from them as best I could was how long the operation was going. Because as it got 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I mean, I thought that if I kind of emphasize that this is ongoing for 5 years, they might think, hey, let's wrap this up, Sean. That's too long a case. So one of my techniques was not to discuss anything about longevity of the case. But that was one of our more important cases. It led to numerous convictions of the Bonanno family, the Lucchese family in New York City. I had a son that was an FBI agent. He was working organized crime in New York, very happy with that assignment, and 9/11 occurred. The day after, he was working terrorism. And all of the agents that were working, the majority of all the agents were working organized crime, and at least in New York, were switched over to terrorism investigations. And he eventually went to Washington and was the supervisor at FBI headquarters, and then left and joined the firm that I founded. Organized crime was prominent. It was the biggest and most interesting type of cases that were the FBI was doing in the criminal area. The espionage area was a different area altogether. It was very interesting work. All the agents, all the good ones, we like to think, were trying to become organized crime agents. After 9/11, they were thrown from working organized crime cases into working terrorism cases. I would tell anyone that was qualified that still the FBI is a good career choice. You have respect. You don't make a lot of money, but you can make some money afterwards in forming your own business like I did and so forth. And you can retire early. You can retire at age 50. So you're still young enough and have enough energy to have a second career if you wish. One of the things that I found in my career was the theme of respect. It's just, it always has amazed me is the idea of they almost demand respect, and the higher you go up, the more they demand it. You're a goner if you disrespect them. And that's why, again, going back to the Alphonse Persico thing, I was successful in getting the jewels back. I honestly believe that it was his payment back of respect that I showed him. It was just a small amount of respect that I showed him. I was taking a bit of a chance and not handcuffing him, but, it worked out in the end.
it to